Don't get on
She
that
sold her
train, she
last
shoots.
possession
We
for
can
a
still
ticket
make this
west,
work.
never guessing a cowboy yearned for her.
It's just too late for
Clara
us
stood
now.
at the edge of the small wooden platform, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the sun touched the rails in a golden glow. The whistle of the train echoed across the town, a sound she had grown to both fear and long for. This train was her only chance, her only way out of the life that had grown heavier with each passing day. She tightened her grip around the small bundle she carried, feeling the worn fabric of her coat against her fingers. It was the only thing she had left of herself, her only comfort in a world that had shown her little kindness. The town behind her was quiet, almost lifeless. Once bustling with families and laughter, it now seemed hollow, empty. Clara had watched friends and neighbors leave for opportunities that never returned, leaving behind boarded-up windows and dusty streets. The bakery where she had once worked was shuttered, the bell above the door silent. Even the river that ran near the town, usually alive with the playful shouts of children, now trickled quietly, reflecting the pale sky. She felt a pang of sadness but quickly pushed it aside. There was no time for regret. Her last possession rested in her hand, a small, delicate locket. It had belonged to her mother, who had passed away many years ago, leaving Clara with memories and this single token of love. The locket was her treasure, a connection to the warmth she had lost. But necessity had grown louder than sentiment. She had made the painful choice to sell it, trading her most precious memory for a ticket west, where she hoped life might be kinder. As she handed the coin to the station clerk, her stomach twisted with both fear and anticipation. There was no turning back now. The train rumbled into view, clouds of steam rising as it slowed to a stop. The sound shook the wooden platform, and Clara's heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She clutched her small bundle tightly, feeling the weight of every decision she had made. She had left behind a town that knew her, familiar faces that would fade into memory, and a life that had taught her the harshest lessons. Ahead lay uncertainty, but she held on to hope, fragile and flickering, like a candle in the wind. As she stepped onto the train, Clara was struck by the diversity of the passengers. Men in worn coats and dusty boots, women with determined faces, and children clinging to small bundles all moved with purpose, each carrying their own story. She felt a strange sense of belonging among strangers, realizing that everyone here was seeking something: freedom, work, adventure, or escape. She found a small seat near the window, placing her bundle on her lap, and gazed out at the town receding behind her. The streets became smaller, the buildings faded, and soon the town was just a memory, swallowed by the vastness of the land. The train began to move steadily, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the rails forming a strange comfort. Clara leaned her head against the window, letting the wind play with her hair, feeling the pulse of the engine beneath her. She thought of the life she left behind, the faces of neighbors who had smiled at her, the lonely evenings spent by the fireplace, and the small moments of joy that had been her anchors. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had no time for sorrow. The future demanded courage. Days of travel stretched before her. The train moved through vast plains, endless fields of gold and green swaying under the open sky. Clara watched in awe as the world unfolded in ways she had never imagined. She saw rivers that sparkled under the sun, forests that seemed to whisper secrets, and mountains rising majestically in the distance. The journey was tiring, but it was also exhilarating. Every mile she traveled took her closer to a new beginning, and she clung to that thought like a lifeline. The people on the train became part of her journey. She shared meals with a mother and her young son, who had left their home in search of work. She listened to an elderly man recount stories of his life, tales of hardship and hope woven together in a tapestry of experience. Each encounter reminded her that she was not alone, that many carried burdens and dreams similar to hers. She found comfort in these connections, small threads of humanity that made the long hours of travel feel less daunting. Yet the journey was not without challenges. One night, a fierce storm hit, shaking the train and sending passengers scrambling. Clara gripped her bundle tightly, her knuckles white, as the wind howled outside. The lights flickered, shadows dancing across the compartment walls. She felt fear creep into her heart, but she refused to succumb. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to move forward despite it. By the morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world glistening with fresh rain and renewed possibility. Clara's thoughts often wandered to what awaited her in the West. She had heard tales of opportunity, of towns where hard work could change a person's life. But she also knew of dangers, strangers with uncertain intentions, harsh weather, and the constant struggle to survive. Still, she held on to hope, imagining herself finding work, earning respect, and perhaps even discovering a place to belong. The unknown was daunting, yet it held promise, and Clara felt a spark of excitement she had not known in years. During the long days, she found moments of quiet reflection. She wrote letters she would never send, recording her dreams and fears, her memories of home and hopes for the future. The pages of her journal became her companion, a place where she could pour her heart without judgment. In these moments, she allowed herself to imagine a life of possibility, a life where she could be free from the burdens that had weighed her down. The act of writing strengthened her resolve, giving shape to the courage she needed to face the journey ahead. The landscapes changed as the train moved further west. Rolling hills gave way to rugged terrain, rivers widened and forests thickened. Clara marveled at the beauty and the challenges the land presented. She realized that just as the land was vast and untamed, so too were the opportunities and trials that awaited her. Every passing scene was a reminder that life was larger than any one town, any one hardship, and that her future, though uncertain, was hers to shape. By the time the train approached its destination, Clara had transformed. The girl who had clutched her locket in desperation had become a woman of quiet strength, tempered by hardship and fueled by hope. She had faced fear, braved storms, and connected with strangers in ways that had strengthened her resolve. The vast landscapes had opened her mind to possibility, and the rhythm of the rails had taught her patience and endurance. As the train slowed and the town of her new beginning came into view, Clara felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. She stepped off the train, the unfamiliar ground firm beneath her feet, and looked around at the bustling streets. Merchants called out from market stalls, children ran and played, and the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. This town was nothing like the quiet streets she had left behind. It was alive, vibrant, and full of potential. Clara adjusted her bundle and took a deep breath. She was ready. She had nothing left of her old life but memories and determination, but that was enough. Every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this moment. She had sold her last possession, risked everything, and now stood on the threshold of a new chapter. She would find work, make friends, and carve out a place for herself in this new world. And though she did not yet know what awaited her, Clara felt a sense of possibility she had never known before. As she walked through the streets, she caught glimpses of people going about their daily lives, each carrying their own stories of hardship and hope. She realized that life in this new town would not be easy, but it would be real, honest, and full of opportunity. Clara held her head high, stepping forward with purpose, determined to make the West her home. Somewhere in the distance, she noticed a figure watching her from across the street. A man on horseback, rugged and quiet, observed her with calm interest. Clara did not notice him much, but the figure lingered in the corner of her vision, a presence she would soon come to recognize. For now, though, she focused on her path, her journey, and the life she was determined to build. She had survived the past, braved the journey, and now she would meet the future head-on. Clara's heart was full of cautious hope. She had left behind everything familiar, stepped into the unknown, and embraced the possibility of a new beginning. The West stretched out before her like a blank canvas, and she was ready to paint her story, one day at a time. Clara took her first steps into the town with a mixture of awe and caution. The streets were alive with movement, horses clopping across wooden planks, merchants calling out their wares, and townsfolk laughing, arguing, and hurrying about their business. The air smelled of fresh bread, hay, and smoke from the chimneys. Everything felt new and strange, yet full of promise. She clutched her small bundle tightly and moved slowly, taking in every detail, hoping to learn the rhythm of this place before it swallowed her in its bustle. Her eyes fell on a small general store, its windows lined with jars, tools, and bolts of cloth. Clara decided to step inside, seeking both information and work. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the shopkeeper, a stout woman with kind eyes, glanced up from behind the counter. "You look new," the woman said with a warm smile. "Looking for a job or just supplies?" "Well, you might be just what we need. We could use some help with the store, cleaning, and deliveries. Come by early tomorrow and we'll see what you can do." Clara's heart lifted. It was not much, but it was a start, a foothold in this strange new world. She thanked the woman and left, feeling a small spark of hope flicker within her. As she wandered the streets, Clara noticed the different kinds of people who called this town home. Some were rough-looking men in worn clothes, dust covering their boots and hats. Others were families, laughing as they walked together, their children trailing behind with baskets of goods. She saw a few cowboys, tall and confident, moving with ease through the crowds. There was an air of toughness here, a sense that everyone had fought to survive, and Clara understood that to belong, she would have to prove her strength. By evening, she found a small boarding house on the edge of town. The building was old, its wooden boards weathered by years of sun and wind, but the warm light shining from the windows suggested comfort within. She knocked and a middle-aged woman opened the door. "Looking for a room?" the woman asked. Clara nodded. "Just for a while," she replied, hoping to find a place where she could rest and plan her next steps. The room was simple but clean, with a small bed, a wooden chair, and a wash basin by the window. Clara placed her bundle on the floor and sat on the bed, feeling the day's journey weigh heavily on her. She thought of the locket she had sold, the coin in her pocket that had bought her passage west, and the life she had left behind. It was gone, all of it, the comfort of familiarity, the quiet streets, and the memories of family. But she had made her choice, and she would not let fear stop her now. The next morning, Clara rose early, the pale light of dawn spilling across her room. She washed quickly, brushed her hair, and made her way to the general store. The town was waking up and the streets were already alive with activity. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she approached the shop, unsure if she would meet expectations or fail immediately. The shopkeeper greeted her with a nod. "Ready to get to work?" she asked. Clara smiled and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She spent the day sweeping floors, organizing shelves, and carrying heavy baskets of goods from the storeroom. Her arms ached, her back protested, but she felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. For the first time in weeks, she felt useful, part of something, and the thought filled her with quiet pride. As the days passed, Clara began to learn more about the town and its people. She discovered which families were friendly, which merchants were strict, and which areas were best avoided. She learned to navigate the rougher parts of town, where men drank and argued late into the night, and where a careless step could lead to trouble. Clara realized that life here required alertness and courage, and she found that she had more of both than she had known. She also began to notice the cowboys, moving confidently across town, their horses sleek and well-kept. One of them in particular caught her attention. He was tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to watch quietly from a distance. Clara had only seen him a few times, always in passing, yet she felt an odd awareness of him, as if he were present even when he was not near. She did not understand it, and she did not think about it too much. Her mind was focused on survival, on earning her place, and on learning the ways of this new life. Finding work was only part of her struggle. Clara also had to learn how to live on her own, cook her meals, and manage her small finances. Every penny mattered, every choice carried weight. She found herself walking to the market early in the morning, haggling carefully for fresh vegetables and bread, and returning to her room to prepare meals that would last for days. It was exhausting work, yet each small success built her confidence. She was learning to rely on herself, and that self-reliance became a quiet source of strength. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara walked through the town square. The sunset bathed the streets in gold, and she paused to take in the view. Children played near a fountain, merchants closed their stalls, and families made their way home. The town felt alive, full of stories and lives intertwined. Clara felt a strange sense of belonging, though she was still a stranger in many ways. She understood that building a life here would take time, patience, and courage. Life was not without its dangers. One afternoon, a group of men began shouting and shoving near the edge of town. Clara froze, unsure of what to do. People scattered, moving quickly to avoid the conflict. A passerby grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a stack of barrels. She watched as the men argued, their voices rising, until finally the situation was diffused by the intervention of a tall cowboy on horseback. He spoke calmly, and the men dispersed, muttering as they left. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. Life in this town could be harsh and unpredictable, and she realized she would need to be careful at all times. Despite the challenges, Clara found small moments of joy. She began to form friendships with other women in town, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams, and struggles. They laughed together, cooked together, and offered advice on how to navigate the complexities of frontier life. These connections, though simple, became anchors for her spirit, reminders that even in hardship, community and kindness existed. Clara learned to appreciate these moments, understanding that they were as important as the work she did to survive. Clara also discovered her own resilience. She learned to face cold nights, long hours, and physical exhaustion with determination. She grew stronger, both in body and spirit, as each day passed. The land and the people challenged her, but she met those challenges with courage. Every small victory, earning a day's wages, fixing a broken tool, preparing a meal, was a step toward independence and self-reliance. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of shaping her own destiny. Her thoughts often wandered back to the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the train, the locket she had sold, and the hope that had driven her west. She understood that she had made sacrifices, but she also realized that those sacrifices were the foundation of her new life. Each choice, no matter how difficult, had brought her closer to a future she could build with her own hands. Then one evening, as she returned from the market, she noticed the tall cowboy again. He was leaning against a fence, watching the sunset. This time he looked directly at her, and their eyes met for a brief moment. Clara felt a strange warmth, a sense of recognition she could not explain. She quickly looked away, telling herself that she had no time for distractions. Her life was about survival, and strangers, especially quiet, strong men on horseback, were not part of her plans. Yet the memory of that glance stayed with her, lingering in the back of her mind like a quiet promise. Clara's days began to settle into a rhythm. She worked hard, learned the ways of the town, and began to feel a sense of stability she had not known in years. She faced hardship, yes, but she also discovered the strength within herself. Every day was a lesson, every challenge a test, and every small success a triumph. She understood that life in the West would never be easy, but it was honest, and it was hers to shape. As the weeks passed, Clara realized she was beginning to feel at home. The town was still new, the streets unfamiliar, and the people often rough, but it had a rhythm and life that she appreciated. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She was becoming part of the story of this place. She smiled to herself, thinking of how far she had come, from the train platform in her old town to the vibrant streets of the West. She had taken a risk, and it was beginning to pay off. Clara did not yet know the future or the path she would take, but she knew she had made the right choice. She had survived the journey, faced the challenges of arrival, and begun to build a life from nothing. The town held opportunities, dangers, friendships, and possibilities she could not yet see. And somewhere in the shadows of the streets and hills, a presence watched her quietly, a cowboy whose story was beginning to intertwine with hers, though she had no idea yet. Clara's story in the West was just beginning, but she was ready. She had strength, courage, and determination, the tools she would need to thrive. She had left behind the past, sold her last possession, and embraced the unknown. And though life would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, Clara knew that she could face it all and emerge stronger. The West was vast, untamed, and full of possibility, and she was ready to meet it head-on. Clara had settled into a quiet rhythm in the town. She worked at the general store, ran small errands, and spent evenings preparing simple meals in her tiny boarding house. Life was still challenging, but she had begun to feel a sense of stability she had not known since leaving her old home. Each day brought new lessons: how to navigate the bustling streets, how to manage her money, and how to keep herself safe in a town that could be harsh and unforgiving. Yet, even as she focused on her work and survival, she could not ignore the presence of the cowboy she had noticed weeks earlier. He seemed to appear at the edges of her life, always watching quietly, yet never intruding. She had caught glimpses of him riding across the fields, helping neighbors with chores, or speaking calmly to a man who had caused trouble in the streets. There was a quiet confidence about him, a calm strength that Clara found both intriguing and comforting, though she did not fully understand why. One afternoon, Clara was carrying a heavy basket of supplies from the market to the general store. She struggled with the weight, wishing she had asked for help. Suddenly, a hand reached out and steadied the basket. Startled, she looked up and found herself face to face with the cowboy. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Clara hesitated, then nodded. Together, they carried the basket into the store. She noticed the ease with which he moved, the strength in his arms, and the careful attention in his eyes. "Thank you," Clara said once the basket was set down. "I can manage most of the time, but it's nice to have help every now and then." Not many women could carry a load like that and keep going. Clara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I've had to learn," she replied. "Life doesn't give second chances." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand the layers of her character. "I can see that," he said finally, tipping his hat before turning and walking away. Clara watched him go, a strange warmth lingering in her chest. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes he would be tending to his horse outside the store, and they would exchange brief words about the weather or the condition of the roads. Other times, she would see him helping a neighbor repair a fence or rescue a trapped calf, his actions quiet but deliberate. Clara began to notice the kindness in his gestures, the way he treated others with respect and care. There was no boastfulness in him, no need for recognition, just steady, dependable strength. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Clara decided to walk to the edge of town to watch the sky change colors. She often found solace in these quiet moments, away from work and the demands of survival. As she walked along the dusty path, she noticed the cowboy again, sitting on a fence post and watching the sunset. He looked at peace, his horse grazing nearby. Clara hesitated, unsure if she should approach, but something inside her nudged her forward. "Beautiful evening," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up and smiled faintly. "It is. There's something about the way the sun touches the hills that makes everything feel calm, doesn't it?" Clara nodded, taking a seat on a nearby rock. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. There was a quiet comfort in his presence, a sense that she could speak or remain silent without judgment. "I didn't mean to intrude," Clara said after a while. I like watching the sunset. It helps me think." These moments remind us why we keep going. Clara felt a surprising connection in his words. There was wisdom in his calm demeanor, a sense of experience that made her feel understood in ways she rarely had. As days turned into weeks, Clara began to trust him more. She noticed small gestures, him tipping his hat as he passed, helping her when she carried heavy goods, or offering advice on how to handle certain situations in town. She realized that he was always looking out for her in subtle ways, and while she did not yet understand why, it gave her a quiet sense of reassurance. Life in the West could be unpredictable, even dangerous, but knowing he was nearby made her feel less alone. One day, while working at the store, Clara heard a commotion outside. A young boy had wandered too close to the edge of the river that ran through the town, and the current had begun to pull at him. Without thinking, Clara rushed outside, calling for help. The cowboy appeared almost instantly, running faster than she had thought possible. Together, they reached the boy just in time, pulling him to safety. Clara's heart pounded with adrenaline, but she felt relief wash over her as she looked at the frightened but unharmed child. "Are you all right?" she asked the boy, brushing dirt from his clothes. He nodded, eyes wide. "Thank you, ma'am." "Thank you, mister." He turned to run back to his mother, and Clara and the cowboy exchanged a glance. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. "You didn't panic." For the first time, Clara felt that their connection was not just by chance. It was built on mutual recognition of courage and strength. Over time, Clara began to notice other qualities in him. He was quiet, yes, but observant. He noticed small details that others overlooked: a broken fence post, a tired horse, a neighbor in need. He acted not for recognition, but because it was right. Clara found herself admiring this about him, though she kept her feelings guarded. She had learned that trust was earned slowly, and she was cautious about opening her heart too quickly. One afternoon, while Clara was walking through the fields outside town, she spotted him again, tending to a wounded horse. She paused, watching as he worked with care, speaking softly to the animal as he cleaned and bandaged its leg. There was a gentleness in his touch, a patience that contrasted with his rugged appearance. Clara felt a stirring of something she could not name, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and something deeper she was not yet ready to understand. "Need some help?" she asked, stepping forward. He looked up, surprised, and shook his head. "No, I've got it, but thanks. You're brave to come out here alone." She did not know how to respond, so she simply nodded, letting the silence speak for them both. As the weeks continued, their encounters became more frequent, though always quiet and measured. They shared brief conversations about the land, the town, and small daily matters. Clara learned that he was known in town for his reliability and fairness, that he helped neighbors quietly and never sought attention. She found herself thinking about him when she was alone, wondering about the life he led beyond what she could see. There was a mystery about him, a depth that intrigued her and drew her closer without her even realizing it. One evening, Clara found herself in the town square, watching the stars appear one by one. The night was clear, and the air smelled of pine and distant fires. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see the cowboy standing a few feet away, his hands resting on the rail of his horse. He nodded in greeting, and she nodded back, unsure of what to say. "It's a clear night," he said finally. "Good for thinking, or just enjoying the quiet. Even in hard times, there's hope if we hold on to it." He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging her words, and for a moment they stood together in quiet understanding, sharing a connection that did not need words. Clara realized that she was beginning to trust him, not just for protection or assistance, but for his presence. In a world that could be harsh and unpredictable, his quiet reliability offered a rare comfort. She did not yet understand the depth of her feelings, but she knew that his presence mattered to her in ways she had not anticipated. The cowboy, too, seemed affected by her. He was drawn to her strength, her courage, and the quiet determination in her eyes. He admired her resilience and the way she navigated a life filled with hardship without losing hope. Yet, he remained respectful, giving her space and allowing their bond to grow slowly, naturally, without pressure or expectation. By the end of the month, Clara began to feel that life in the West was not just about survival, it was about connection. She had faced hardship, learned new skills, and discovered a community, however small. And somewhere in the midst of all this, she had found a presence that offered quiet support, a bond that was unspoken yet growing stronger. The cowboy was no longer just a figure at the edge of her vision. He was becoming a part of her story, though neither of them fully understood how or when that story would unfold. Clara continued to work hard, navigating the challenges of the town while slowly opening her heart to the possibility of friendship, trust, and perhaps even something more. She had survived the journey west, faced the difficulties of arrival, and begun to find her place in a new world. And as she looked at the horizon each evening, she could not help but wonder what the future might hold, not just for her, but for the quiet cowboy who had come into her life in ways small and significant, shaping her days without her even realizing it. Clara had begun to feel a rhythm to her life in the town. Days were filled with work at the general store, errands, and learning to navigate the rugged landscape of the West. Nights were quiet, spent in reflection or small moments of companionship with friends she had met in the town. Yet, amidst this growing sense of stability, there remained a constant, quiet presence in her life: the cowboy. He appeared at unexpected moments, offering help, guidance, or simply a reassuring presence. She had begun to recognize the subtle ways he watched over her, though she had not yet allowed herself to fully acknowledge how much she relied on it. One morning, as she walked to the market to gather supplies, Clara noticed that the sky was overcast and a chill hung in the air. The wind had picked up, carrying dust and debris along the streets. People hurried along, pulling coats tight and shielding their faces from the gusts. Clara tightened the straps of her bundle and pressed on, determined to complete her errands before the storm arrived. She knew that life in the West required perseverance, and she refused to let a little wind deter her. As she reached the market, she heard a commotion near the edge of town. A young boy had wandered too close to the river, and the sudden rise in the current threatened to sweep him away. Without hesitation, Clara ran toward him, calling for help. In that instant, the cowboy appeared, moving with swift, practiced ease. Together, they reached the boy just in time, pulling him to safety. The boy's mother rushed forward, tears of relief in her eyes, and thanked them both profusely. Clara felt her heart racing from the adrenaline, but also a quiet sense of satisfaction. She realized that in moments of crisis, courage mattered more than fear. "Are you hurt?" the cowboy asked, turning to Clara. She shook her head, brushing dust from her sleeves. "No, just a little shaken." "But it's okay. The boy is safe." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a look that conveyed both concern and quiet admiration. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of pride and something she did not yet have words for. They had acted together instinctively, and in that shared moment, a bond had been reinforced. The days following the incident brought unexpected challenges. The storm that had been gathering finally arrived, pounding the town with heavy rain and gusting winds. Streets became muddy rivers, and buildings creaked under the force of the wind. Clara found herself trapped in her boarding house, staring out at the chaos, feeling powerless against the forces of nature. Yet she also felt a sense of determination. Life in the West was unpredictable, and she had survived hardships before. She would face this one as well. The cowboy appeared at her door that evening, water dripping from his hat and coat. "I thought you might need help securing your room and belongings," he said, his calm voice cutting through the howling wind. Clara felt a surge of gratitude. Together, they moved her few possessions to safer corners, tied down what could be swept away, and reinforced the window shutters. It was hard work, exhausting in the cold and wet, yet the act of working together created a silent camaraderie between them. They did not speak much, letting their actions communicate what words could not. After the storm passed, the town bore the marks of the wind and rain. Fallen branches blocked streets and debris littered the sidewalks. Shops had sustained minor damage, and residents were busy repairing what they could. Clara joined the effort, helping neighbors clean and rebuild. She saw the cowboy working tirelessly, assisting wherever needed without seeking attention. She admired his quiet dedication, realizing that true strength was often shown in service rather than words. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the outskirts of town, Clara slipped on a wet plank and twisted her ankle. Pain shot through her leg and she struggled to remain upright. The cowboy appeared almost instantly, helping her to a nearby post. "Careful," he said gently. "Let me help you." He supported her as they slowly made their way back to town, his presence steadying her. Clara felt a deep sense of trust, a realization that she could rely on him not just for protection but for guidance and companionship. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to recognize the patterns of the town and its people. She noticed who could be trusted, who was fair in trade, and who might take advantage of newcomers. The cowboy remained a constant in the background, quietly observing and stepping in when necessary. There was no need for grand gestures. His presence alone provided reassurance. Clara began to understand that true connection was built not on words alone, but on consistent care and shared experiences. One evening, Clara found herself walking to the riverbank, reflecting on how much her life had changed since arriving in the West. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. The town's sounds were distant now, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle flow of the river. She felt a sense of peace, rare and precious. The cowboy appeared beside her as if drawn by the same quiet contemplation. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked. Clara nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, it's calming. I never thought I'd find this kind of peace here." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable yet warm. Peace is something we find even in hard places. Sometimes we just have to look a little closer. Clara felt the truth in his words, realizing that her journey west had not just been about survival, it had been about discovery, about finding hope and strength within herself. As time passed, their interactions deepened. They began to share stories of their pasts, revealing glimpses of who they were beyond the immediate challenges of daily life. Clara spoke of her family, the town she had left behind, and the choices that had brought her here. The cowboy, in turn, shared stories of his life on the ranch, the hardships he had faced, and the quiet joys he had discovered along the way. Each story, each shared memory, built a bridge of understanding between them, slowly transforming respect into affection. There were moments of lightness as well. They would sometimes laugh together at small mishaps, a spilled basket of flour, a stubborn mule, or a mischievous child. These moments, though brief, were treasured, reminders that life, even in its difficulties, held joy. Clara found herself looking forward to these interactions, the warmth of companionship softening the edges of her lonely days. Yet, life in the West was not without tension. One afternoon, a dispute arose between two ranchers over grazing rights. Voices were raised and the threat of violence lingered. Clara watched from a distance, unsure how to intervene. The cowboy appeared, speaking calmly and firmly, his presence commanding attention. Slowly, the men listened, their anger easing under his steady guidance. Clara felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. In moments of conflict, he provided a sense of stability, a reminder that courage could be quiet yet powerful. Through all these experiences, Clara felt a growing awareness of the bond forming between them. It was not just admiration or trust. It was a recognition of shared values, a connection built on understanding, courage, and kindness. She had learned to rely on herself, but she also realized that having someone by her side did not diminish her strength. It enhanced it. The cowboy was becoming not just a companion, but a partner in the journey of life she was slowly building in this new town. One evening, as they worked together to mend a damaged fence after a sudden rainstorm, Clara found herself laughing at a minor mishap. The cowboy chuckled, his deep, quiet laughter blending with the sounds of the evening. For a moment, the hardships of life faded, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and warmth. Clara realized that she had not felt this lightness in years, and it was a gift she had not anticipated when she sold her last possession to come west. As the night settled over the town, Clara and the cowboy stood together, looking at the stars beginning to appear. She felt a sense of gratitude, not just for his presence, but for the journey that had brought her here. The hardships, the storms, the long days of work, they had all shaped her into someone stronger, someone capable of facing the challenges ahead. And in the quiet strength of the cowboy beside her, she found not just protection, but understanding, companionship, and the first stirrings of something deeper. By the end of part 4, Clara had grown more confident, independent, and aware of her feelings. The cowboy had become an integral part of her life, a steady presence in the midst of uncertainty. Together, they had faced storms, both literal and figurative, building trust and connection through shared experiences. Clara understood that the journey west had not just been about survival, it had been about finding strength, hope, and the possibility of love in unexpected places.